Hi everyone. All right, since we're not going to have class between when I had all my individual meetings with you and when you need to show up for your peer edit with your rough draft, this is a quick video just to make sure everybody knows what they're supposed to do between now and the rough draft. So at this point, I've met with everybody. For the most part, everybody's outlines have been approved. The few of you who still need to check in with me, you know what you need to do. Okay, let's pretend now your rough draft or your outline is good. This is what you do. First of all, remember, every quote should get its own paragraph. So if I open up here, and this was the example comparative outline, not essay, the example comparative outline that I went over in the previous outline video. So remember, you have your first step, which is your introduction and thesis. And for many of you at this point, you have almost your entire introduction paragraph written. You just need to flesh it out with a little bit of extra, a few extra ideas and transitions in there, and then you're in good shape there for your introduction. So get that paragraph written, then move on down to your first argument. So here in your first argument, this step here, where you identified what the argument topic is, this is not a paragraph. Do not write a paragraph just for this line. Instead, the first quote is your, go away you, the first quote is your paragraph. So this is what you'll do, and what you'll do is begin that with a topic sentence that incorporates what the argument is going to be. Let me show you what this looks like in the actual example essay we have here. So this is an essay that, for the most part, has been written based on the example outline we've been looking at. So here is the introduction paragraph. In this case, it's a little bit short. I would prefer your introduction paragraph really be the minimum half page. Do the best you can, though. If it ends up being, a line or two shorter than a half page, I'm not going to be holding a ruler to it. I'd rather it be a meaningful paragraph and not have a lot of empty sentences in it. So then we move into your next paragraph. So note here, if we went back and actually looked at the outline again, you'll see the argument was that the mayor and dentist are both trying to assert power. And then my first paragraph is going to be about the mayor himself specifically asserting his power. So now let's come back over here and look at the example essay. So I start by talking about both men, the argument topic, not the paragraph topic. An examination of some of the particular things that both men say or do in the course of this exchange demonstrates that they are clearly capable of exerting a certain level of power over the other. So that's my topic sentence, not just for this paragraph, but really for the next few paragraphs that are all going to be in this particular argument. Then my next sentence is more like my topic sentence for the for this individual paragraph. The mayor's I have a typo there. Don't be like me. Don't have a typo. The mayor asserts his own power over the dentist as soon as he arrives in the office, since he demands to be seen despite not having an appointment. And there I did put a little page citation since I'm actually talking about something specific that happens in the text. But really, this is a topic sentence talking about the fact that the mayor specifically now is asserting his own power, and the rest of this paragraph is going to deal with just that. The dentist attempts to turn the mayor away, but the latter then demonstrates the level of authority he is capable of exhibiting, and now here comes my quote introduction, as can be seen in the subsequent exchange between the dentist and his son. So in this, I've been given the context of what's happening plot-wise, and since these are quotes of people talking, I have said who is actually talking. In this case, I personally like to introduce my quotes with a colon. Whether you introduce them with a colon or a comma depends a little bit on actually the way you are structuring the quote grammatically. I can talk about this after you guys have done your rough drafts if you're interested in that. Just remind me in class. So, Papa, what? He, the dentist, still hadn't changed his expression. He says if you don't take out his tooth, he'll shoot you. I'd like to point this little moment out here also. In the original quote, it just says he still hadn't changed his expression, but for a reader of this essay, they're not going to know who the he is necessarily. So I put in these little brackets which is the signal that this is you, the author, adding something into the quote that's not part of the original quote. And then I clarify who he is. At the end of the quote, we have the page number citation. Then, once the quote is given, I give my quote follow-up. I'm going to talk about what specifically just happened in the quote, why the quote is important, and how the quote is going to apply to my overall argument. This threat by the mayor to shoot the dentist at first may seem like simple macho bravado, but a closer consideration of the threat reveals a far more insidious implication. The mayor's claim that he will shoot the dentist is no empty attempt at intimidation. In fact, not only will the mayor shoot the dentist, but he can shoot the dentist, and probably the son too, without risk of punishment. The dentist knows this, which is why he reluctantly admits the mayor into his office, albeit with his own revolver at hand. So I'm not going to go over every single paragraph in this essay, in this sample essay. I'll upload it to Canvas if you want to look at it in its entirety. But this is just a basic idea. So again, we've got the topic sentence for the argument, then the topic sentence for the paragraph, the quote intro, the quote, and the quote follow-up. When I get into my next paragraph, I'm still in argument number 1 here, so I don't need a new topic sentence for the argument now. I'm just going to begin with maybe a little bit of a transition sentence to help move on from my previous paragraph, because now I'm moving from the mayor to talking about the dentist. So I put something in that just helps to move that transition along, and then I jump right on into my quote intro. The transition sentence there is also functioning as a topic sentence for this particular paragraph. And that's, and then pretty much rinse and repeat. When you get to a new argument, here argument number 2, have a new transition sentence, which can also function as a topic sentence for the new overall argument. And then, quote intro, quote follow-up, over and over and over, and that's how your essay works until you run out of quotes. And then you get finally to your conclusion paragraph. I'll talk more about the conclusion in just a moment. So, okay, back here. So I've already talked through a few of these ideas, but I'll just run through them real quick again for review. So each quote gets its own paragraph. Remember, you structure your paragraph with the topic sentence for the argument, if it's the broad argument, the first paragraph of the new argument, and then at least a topic sentence for the individual paragraph. The quote introduction. Sometimes your topic sentence and quote introduction can be the same sentence. They don't have to be separate sentences. Then your quote or your text paraphrase and your quote follow-up. Rinse and repeat. Now, the example essay I'm showing here doesn't actually have secondary sources in it, so I'm going to look at a few other examples to talk about those. As I told many of you in your individual appointments, secondary sources can be placed in a few different ways. They can be part of a primary source quote paragraph, or a secondary source quote. If there's enough meat to it to really go on and talk about it for a little while, you can give it its own paragraph that follows the primary source paragraph. You can also, if the secondary source is only dealing with one of your primary texts, then one of these options is a good way to go. However, if your secondary source really applies to both of your texts, then consider putting that quote in your compare-contrast paragraph that comes at the end of your overall argument. And that way you can use it to talk about both of your primary sources. As far as the way you structure a paragraph with a secondary source, if the secondary source quote has its own paragraph, it's going to follow the same format as your primary sources. Topic sentence, quote intro, quote follow-up. If your secondary source is part of the primary source quote paragraph, then here's one example of how you could approach it, but use your judgment on this one. This is not a rule. This is just a suggestion or a guideline. So again, your paragraph could have a topic sentence, the same typical stuff for your primary quote, and then instead of ending the paragraph, jump into your secondary source quote introduction, give the quote, and the quote follow-up. So it's the same general concept as the primary quote, just rinsed and repeated for your secondary quote. In a paragraph, it doesn't matter if you put the primary quote first or the secondary quote, but just when you have that quote there, again, make sure you're giving an intro and a follow-up and talking about the importance of the quote. Don't ever let the quote do its own work. Okay, before we get on to the next idea, let's look at that in action real quickly. So we looked at this particular paragraph briefly in class one day. This is an example from a paragraph that I myself wrote once, where I'm actually starting with my secondary source and then having my primary source. So my paragraph begins, I'm not going to read this paragraph in its entirety, but I'll just point out the highlights. It starts out where I name who the quote is from. This is a topic sentence that talks about what the paragraph is about, the impossibility of separating Byron from his fiction. I'm introducing the quote in this same sentence as doing the topic sentence by having the author name, the title of the text where it comes from, and what the quote is going to be about. And then I give my quote, which goes down for a little while. When I get to the end of the quote, I give my text citation. And then I spend some time talking about the follow-up to my secondary source quote. I don't just leave the quote by itself. Then I move into it by, really more like here, I introduce now my primary source quote. I talk about how this secondary source idea is now going to be shown in the primary text itself. I give my quote citation, and then once again, quote follow-up. Now here, I'll admit, this is kind of a bad example. Do as I say, not as I do. This is a very short quote follow-up for a quote that is this long. You should be talking more than this for a quote, especially if it's this long. So just, yeah, be aware of that. Okay. All right, almost done. Let me just move through a few other pointers I want to talk about. Transition markers. This is something a lot of people forget about, especially when they're relatively new to writing essays. This is a major college student issue I tend to see. I want you to pay attention to your transition markers. By transition marker, what I mean is at the beginning of a new paragraph, either a sentence or even a phrase or a word, something to clarify that you're staying on the same topic or that you're moving to a new topic. If you're between sentences, even if your sentences are moving from one idea to another, think about how you're transitioning from one sentence to the next. Also remember, your transition sentence does not go at the end of your old paragraph. It needs to be the first sentence of your new paragraph is where the transition sentence goes. I'm going to say that again because it's important and I don't want to go in one ear and out the other. Transition sentences do not go at the end of the old paragraph. Transition sentences go at the beginning of the new paragraph. So once you've gotten through all of your essay quote discussions, finally you get to the conclusion, the last step of your outline. The conclusion paragraph, of course, should have a restatement of your thesis. It should not be word for word identical to your original introduction thesis sentence. Find a way to say it again, but with different words. Then, moving on from that, you can talk a little bit about how you proved your thesis. If you want to have a very brief reiteration of your major argument points, just to say, in the reminder, this is how it's been proven, that's fine. Ultimately, your conclusion does need to be more than just a restatement of your thesis and arguments. You do want to complicate it in some way. So a couple other ways, in addition to just considering alternative arguments, is you can ponder the overall implications of your essay's conclusion or thesis statement. So if you follow the little orange arrow here, that's what I've done here. It gives a painful reminder that those in governmental positions are fundamentally dangerous by definition of their professions. So I could have taken an idea like that and even talked a little bit more about it. So if you want to talk about broader world implications of your topic, this is where all of the universal type of discussion that I've warned against for your actual thesis, this is where you can bring in your completely subjective opinions and let them fly a little bit here in your conclusion. Have some fun here. The other idea you could consider is, does your thesis, your paper, warrant further study or another follow-up paper for a future idea? Has it brought up additional questions that could be answered by others? So for example, here I wrote, "Finally, this story leaves its readers with a haunting question. How big do small acts of defiance need to become before they can truly cause a ripple in the ocean of governmental power?" So that is a very broad question to leave on, but it leaves your essay with almost kind of a little bit of a fun cliffhanger. So somewhere that your ideas can go and lead to really, again, emphasize their importance. And that's pretty much how your conclusion can work. But do make sure you have these, some way of complicating your conclusion paragraph. Don't just restate your thesis. All right. Finally, even though this is a rough draft, treat it like a final draft. So the way that you should really proofread a paper is, first of all, when you're done writing it, step away for a minimum of 30 minutes. Even better, go to bed for the night and look at it again in the morning. When you're writing, you're very close to your writing. You can be very emotionally attached to it. I know I get extremely emotionally attached to my writing sometimes, and that can make it very difficult to identify moments where your writing perhaps is not as clear as it should be. And so you want that distance to be able to spot that. Second, print a hard copy for proofreading. I have given this a bajillion exclamation points, and once again, I'm going to say this again because it is one of the most important things you can do. Print a hard copy. Do not proofread on your computer monitor. This is critical. The computer monitor adds a level of authority to your words that they do not deserve. And I don't say that because you're you. I say it because that's the case for everybody. Shakespeare could be writing on a computer monitor, and that computer monitor would give Shakespeare authority that his words don't deserve. Print it. You will have an easier time spotting errors and spotting problems when you're looking at a printed copy. I can tell always when a student has not done this step. I guarantee it. When you are proofreading, proofread for only one detail at a time. So you'll be rereading your essay more than once. Don't just give it one quick read through and call it a day. So for example, these are some of the rereads you might want to do. I always recommend, first and foremost, read for awkward wording or a lack of clarity in your ideas. So again, this is one of the most important steps for stepping away and then coming back a little later. It will make it easier to spot moments when you have not been as clear as you should be. You can also, I would recommend this would be a good step to ask a friend or family member to read your essay, because somebody else is going to have an easier time spotting lack of clarity than you, because you know what you meant with your words, but somebody else is not going to know what you mean. And this is a big one. I want everyone to really pay attention to the clarity of their writing. This is one of the most important skill sets I want to emphasize with this assignment. Next, awkward or missing transition statements. So I already talked a little bit about that. Make sure those are in there. That can really get its own proofread just for transitions alone. Then we can get down to the nitty-gritty. Do another proofread where you're looking for things like misspelled words, typos, and overt grammar errors. Then, after you've done that, if you have a particular type of grammar problem that you struggle with, do a proofread just for that problem. So for example, if you struggle with commas, do a proofread where all you're paying attention to are your commas. Or do a proofread where all you pay attention to are your apostrophes. Or maybe if you are somebody who often confuses words like its and its. When I type, I know the difference between its with an apostrophe and its without an apostrophe, but when I'm writing fast, I have been known to frequently misuse those two words. So I always do a proofread just for those words to make sure I didn't have any bonehead moments while I'm writing. So identify what your unique grammar issues are and do proofreads just for those. Last but not least, the last proofread you should do is for MLA formatting. I'm going to be sending out some documents about MLA formatting, and frankly, for your rough draft, this is the one example where I'm okay if your rough draft isn't formatted properly. Try, it'll save you work later on, but your rough draft isn't going to be graded for MLA, and I will be taking time in class when we return to talk about MLA formatting and rules. So if you want to just hold off on that until later, that's completely fine for this particular assignment. All right, so that's pretty much the major stuff to remember as you're moving into your rough draft. Remember that rough drafts are due on the day we return to class. So next time we see each other on Tuesday after Thanksgiving, you should come to class with 2 printed copies of your essay and 2 printed copies of the peer edit form, which you'll be able to find on Canvas. I'm going to also be sending that form out as an announcement. So just once that's up, you'll be getting an email. Remember, print 2 copies of each, not just 1, and make sure you show up to class on time that day, because if you're late and we've already started, you're not going to have anybody to trade essays with, and it will be as if you were absent. Or at the very least, you'll have to wait until the second round of peer edits in that class, and you'll be counted as half absent, basically. I don't want that to happen. There's always at least one person in class who still shows up late or who shows up and forgot to print the peer edit form. Don't let that person be you. Please, please, please. Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. So, all right, I think that's about it. I hope you all have a lovely, lovely Turkey Day. And if you have any questions at all that I did not address in this quick video, email me. I will be sending out FAQ emails of anonymous rewordings of people's questions and my answers as I receive them.